Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start, and first let's continue with updates that are coming from the United States of America. During the previous night we got lots of very interesting statements and things that came from the US. For example, Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, stated that we have supported Ukraine but this conflict must end. Secretary of State Mark Rubio on ABC's Good Morning America answered a question about Trump's campaign promise to end the conflict between Russia and Ukraine on day one. Look, this is a difficult, tragic conflict. It has done enormous damage to Ukraine and to Russia, but also to stability in Europe. So we see that Ukraine most likely will lose their support from the United States of America. So of course let's wait and see what is going to be next, because it's too early to make any conclusions. Furthermore, we got very important very important update that came from the White House. President Trump announced $5 billion AI investment partnering with OpenAI, Oracle and SoftBank. Telling the truth, this is a very important decision, and that's a lot of money, and obviously the United States of America are planning to become number one in this sphere in AI investments and in AI technologies. Of course, these technologies can change the world in the future. The technologies are already changing the world. Furthermore, we got another important statement that Trump signed an executive order officially labeling cartels and similar groups as foreign terrorist organizations. You know that when talking about cartels, this is a very important topic and very interesting topic that is coming from Mexico. We made a small investigation about this question, and for example, this is the map of Mexico, and in this map we can see lots of regions, and every single color means another group or another cartel organization. So the situation in Mexico with cartel organizations is much more difficult and complicated than the situation, for example, in Syria with their own groups. And if the United States of America begin anti-cartel operation, special operation or something like this, obviously this can lead to significant losses from both sides. And obviously this is exactly what, for example, Russia, China or other opponents of the United States of America are waiting most of all. Now let's move further. Let's discuss the situation in Ukraine. We have lots of very interesting updates from Kiev. Let's discuss them in details. Zelensky stated that Putin will demand, according to, we know that there is negotiation process. He is always behind the scene, this process, and obviously Russia and Ukraine has some roads of communication, maybe through different countries. And today Zelensky revealed several, let's say, statements, several points of a possible peace agreement. According to him, Putin will demand a five-fold reduction in the Ukrainian armed forces and guarantees of Ukraine's withdrawal from NATO. That was stated by Zelensky, and you know that Zelensky added that he will never accept this, and if he never accept these terms, most likely Russia will never finish the special military operation despite the pressure that is coming from the United States of America. Okay, now let's discuss the situation on the ground. We have a lot of very interesting updates, and of course the most important updates are coming from the settlement of Velika Novoselovka. We have adjusted the map in this area. For example, this is how the map looked like yesterday by the end of the 21st of January. This is the situation how the map looked like by the beginning of the 22nd. So by these changes we just wanted to show that the settlement of Velika Novoselovka was cut by the Russians completely, and now the Ukrainians have no safe roads between the village itself and the mainland. We got a lot of statements and reports from different sources. For example, some neutral military experts reported that we can speak of an effective encirclement of Velika Novosilka. Ukrainian forces have withdrawn towards the center of the locality and are trying to launch a counterattacks against Vremivka, as its temporary recapture would allow Ukrainian troops to break out of the encirclement by the western road and the secondary roads, as now it can only be crossed by crossing the river, and dangerous and costly option. We can speak that the fight of Velika Novoselovka has entered its terminal phase, and possibly the town will have fallen before the end of January. So what military experts are saying that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians that were blocked in the most southern part of Velika Novoselovka to the south of the river by the name of Shaitanka, they realized that these Ukrainians had no chances to move in the northern direction, because during the previous 24 hours the Russians managed to improve their position significantly significantly in the eastern part and to take under control significant territories. For example, this small block was taken by the Russians, so this is the situation, and now this, so you can see the changes. This is the situation by the end of the 21st of January, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 22nd. As you can see, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the central part, and now the Ukrainians from the southern part have no chances to retreat without losses. And the sources and military experts are saying that Ukrainians during the previous night made lots of attempts to break through the encirclement through the settlement of Remevka. So this is the road of attack the Ukrainians were using during the previous night. But the Russians are saying that they expected this maneuver from the Ukrainian side, and when the Ukrainians began moving, the Russians began attacks. The Russians began attacking these territories, these units with artillery, with everything they had, and the Ukrainians suffered significant losses, and most likely maybe some of the groups managed to break through the encirclement, but the majority of Ukrainian troopers from the south were destroyed during this attempt. Furthermore, when talking about the northern part, the Ukrainians are waiting for something, but obviously the miracle is not going to happen. Once again, let's take a look at how the map was changing for the previous days. This is the situation by the end of the 21st of January, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 22nd of January. The Russians captured completely the northern eastern part, and the Russians continue advancing in the direction of the village itself. Now let's move further. We have several very important updates in the direction of Bogatyr. Today, the Ukrainian sources published the video how they managed to discover the redeployment and the positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the vicinity of the settlement of Razdolne, and then the Ukrainians began bombing and attacking the Russian forces. So based on this video, we have adjusted the map by adding additional square and the complete Russian control. So from this video, we see that the Russians are trying to outflank the company stronghold that located to the west of Razdolne, and to take the stronghold in pincers or to force the Ukrainians to fall back. If this stronghold falls, then the Russians will be able to advance further in the northwestern directions towards the settlement of Odradne or N15 road. As for the Kurachovo-Poky, during the previous 24 hours, we got just several important updates that were prepared by pro-Ukrainian sources. The Ukrainians are saying that during the previous 24 hours they counterattacked, that they successfully counterattacked the Russians in the area of Shevchenka, and as a result of those counterattacks, the Ukrainians managed to restore control over the dense network of the fortifications between Shevchenka and Andreevka itself, and to restore control over some positions in the western part of Shevchenka. The Ukrainians colored these territories, as you can see, as a gray zone. So now this is the things that were shown to us by pro-Ukrainian sources. As for different pro-Russian resources and pro-Ukrainian sources, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians continue advancing in the southwestern direction with the purpose to outflank the Andreevka fortified area and to attack the Ukrainians from behind. During the previous 24 hours, several more progresses on the ground were recorded. Now let's move further. Let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, where the situation is not so easy as we saw and we thought several days ago. I'll remind you that yesterday the Ukrainians of the 425th Battalion, Skala, the Rock, they counterattacked the Russian positions in the vicinity of Kotlina. We discussed this video yesterday. We didn't know yesterday whether we should to update the map or not. We don't know right and now, so we're just waiting for additional updates. But the sources are saying that Ukrainians managed to concentrate significant forces in the vicinity of Kotlina, and they thrown in this area everything they had, and currently there are very heavy clashes, and the Ukrainians are trying to restore control over this small village. As for now, we don't know for sure whether the Ukrainians managed to restore control or not, but this is exactly what they are doing right now, and the next 24 hours are going to be decisive for the Ukrainians, because if the Russians are able to repel every single Ukrainian attack in the area of Odachne, or in the area of Kotlina, or in the area of Uspenovka, then the Russians will be able to continue advancing further in the northwestern direction, and very fast, and to get the settlement of Sergeyevka very fast. Now let's move to the Konstantinovka direction. Today, different pro-Russian resources reported that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Baranovka. Summarizing everything, this is already the territories that were captured by the Russians, according to pro-Russian sources. As for the city of Toretsk, we haven't received anything special when talking about the situation on the ground, when talking about additional progress or offensive operation. As you can see, complete absence of any icon. But we got very important statement, very important video from the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation. They stated that Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Russian Federation, Valery Gerasimov, came to Donetsk region, Donetsk People Republic, and he visited the headquarters of the Group of Forces Center. And the Group of Forces Center is responsible for several directions, including the city of Pokrovsk, the city of Toretsk, and the city of Chasiv Yar. So he visited this area, he awarded some soldiers for their duty, and of course he talked with the commanders in this direction, giving them final orders. Something tells me that he brought a lot of very interesting papers, documents, and maps about further plans of the Russian Federation in this area. So very interesting and very important. I'll remind you that the last time Gerasimov visited the line of combat contact was the South Donetsk direction before the fall of the settlement of Ugledar and before this entire situation in the South Donetsk direction. So the visit of the Group of Forces Center means a lot, and it's a very important event. Now let's move further. As for the Sivas direction, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything. As for the Liman direction, there are still very heavy clashes for the company stronghold that located in the vicinity of the settlement Kolodzy, between the settlement of Kolodzy and Ivanovka. In this video we can see another attempt from the Ukrainian side to counterattack the positions of the armed forces of Russian Federation around the settlement of Ivanovka. The Ukrainians brought additional vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, engineering machines, engineering equipment, but the Russians they were waiting for Ukraine counterattack, and they were ready, and when Ukrainians sent their forces, everything was discovered and destroyed by the Russians' FPV drones. Another counterattack of the armed forces of Ukraine was repelled, and I'll remind you that this is probably 5th or 6th day in a row when Ukrainians are trying to counterattack with the purpose to restore control over the lost territories. Every single attack during the previous 6 days was repelled by the Russians. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the northern Kupiansk direction. Today, according to different pro-Russian sources, as a result of offensive operation, the armed forces of Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Zapadnaya. If this information is correct, this is the second settlement on the Ukrainian side of the river of Oskol that was captured and secured by the Russians. The first one is the town of Dvorechna. There are still a lot of clashes in the northwestern direction, but we can say that the settlement either already captured by the Russians or about to be captured. And Zapadnaya is the second, and now we see that the Russians managed to create a very powerful foothold in this area, which allows the Russians to concentrate now not just, let's say, companies, but battalions or even a brigade that can move further or advance further in the northwestern direction over the purpose to outflank the city of Kupiansk. As for the Sudzha direction, during the previous 24 hours we got lots of very interesting updates from the southern part. Today the Russian sources published the video how the Russians raised the flag in the most southern part of Nikolaev Daringa, and you know that this is a very complicated situation because the territory where the Russians raised the flag, according to our map, was already under the Russian control. So the Russians, according to our map, captured this territory a long time ago. Then they were forced to fall back from the central and the northeastern part of Nikolaev Darina, and now we see the video with the Russian flag. So it's very complicated and difficult to understand what to do, because lots of pro-Russian sources reported that the entire village and settlement was captured, and furthermore the Russians managed to advance deep inside of the territory in the direction of Sverdlikova. So as for now we are not going to change the map, because once again the flag was raised on the territory that was already colored in Russian favor. So let's wait for additional updates, and as soon as we get one we will adjust the map in Russian favor. Anyway, this is a very important progress, a very important achievement if this information is correct, because from the settlement of Nikolaev Darina the Russians can attack either in the direction of Sverdlikova, both in the direction of Sverdlikova, or the Russians can turn in the southern direction and to attack the settlements like Zhuravka or the settlement of Bastovka. If the Russians are able to take any of these settlements under complete control, this is going to be another piece of puzzle in the picture by the name of complete disaster for the armed forces of Ukraine in the Sudzha direction, because every single settlement makes the Russians much closer to the last and the main supply road NO7. Furthermore, the Russians, when they were forced to fall back from Makhnovka, regrouped, and and they began another phase of offensive operation in the direction of Sudzha. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours, we received a lot of videos, a lot of geolocations of how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainian positions in the settlement of Makhnovka and in the settlement of Sudzha. All these events, all these videos tell us just one about thing. The Ukrainians brought lots of forces in this area with the purpose to stabilize the situation. Now the Russians retreat back towards the southern part of Makhnovka. They brought additional FPV drone groups, operators, and began clearing the city of Sudzha and the agglomeration with the purpose to deal as much as possible damage to the Ukrainians. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians continue advancing in the area of Malaya Loknya, but as for now without any changes on the ground. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.